back, everybody. I guess welcome back to me since I'm the one that's never here. I hope you guys had a fun, fast, and furious month of Arctic tundra between our last session. Hopefully the sunshine is here to stay. I hope that you also really enjoyed our first session where we dug into the when, we dug into time, and hopefully I shook up your perspective a little bit about diets and how health and wellness are typically approached in an incorrect manner. I gave you some homework that we're going to be chatting through, so just keep in mind if your mouths are full and you're chewing, I'm going to be asking for some feedback if you're willing to give it here shortly. But welcome to session 2. Session 2 is the how. Session 2 is called how because after we did our time budget and realized that we try and jam 200 hours into 168, the follow-up question is, how the hell am I going to do this? And that's what we get to do today. We're going to troubleshoot how we're going to better navigate and better use our time awareness to drive forward positive habits and hopefully make time for positive habits. So for those of you that don't remember, my name is Andrew, and while I'm a dietitian by trade, I want you to think of me as your director of wellness. So this is your monthly director's meeting to make sure you've been thinking about you and your self-care. That is the hope here, and that's what we'll continue to do through session 3, and then also offer you as dietitians as a case-specific nutrition here in the months ahead. So the goal of last session and this session, I want to bridge the gap and show you my cards a little bit. The goal is to use improved clarity of time to help you identify your most effective options, right? If we zoom out first when we're trying to make lifestyle changes and we say, wait a second, when is everything happening in my life, right? That zoom out will hopefully give you some clarity about when certain things can take place, and then also can give you some details about how things can take place given the when. And so that's what I'm hoping to do today is we use our time value of last time to troubleshoot this time and give you some clarity that will, instead of you having to then try and force habits, jam them into a schedule that has no room, you will instead be able to seamlessly integrate them. And that is the difference, right? A diet is a temporary thing where you hold your breath and make the whole world around you change. A lifestyle is when you find a way to navigate the world around you. So I'm hopeful that we can use that different approach to create something that feels more natural and feels more permanent. So let's recap. Session 1, right? We dug into the when first. Couple of my main comments, if I was going to try and appropriately summarize our 1-hour session into an elevator pitch, is if you don't focus on when first, the what will inevitably fail you. Right? That's where you say, I'm going to go to the gym, but if you don't know when you're going to go to the gym, guess how often you're getting to the gym? Not great, right? If we don't know when we're eating lunch, how often do we actually stop to eat lunch in the middle of the day? Without the when, we end up being extremely inconsistent. Busy to-do lists can be an easy blame game there, right? We've got a long list of 100 things to do. Many of you are probably thinking about the thing you have to do after this while you're here in this, and the 37 things after that, and what you have to do after work. We start to realize we live busy lives. That's actually something we can all share in, especially as passionate professionals. And so unfortunately, that tends to leave health habits on that tentative list of, I'd like to get to the gym, right? It's so easy to let the meeting of one, you and your self-care, get replaced by a meeting for 2 or 3 or 5 or 40, like today's meeting. Scheduling things, as a result, becomes one of the most essential aspects of your self-care. Just like all the other meetings you schedule, if you schedule it, it happens. When your self-care gets scheduled, it happens. And so if we want to create consistency, the first is that consistency of the when. So I want some feedback for those of you that actually went through and did the time buckets. Just a reminder, we had our 7 categories of where life tends to be lived. And we gave you maps to kind of write out what it was. And then my challenge to you was sort of twofold for those of you that are more numeric, and then for those of you that are visual. The numeric people, the challenge was add up all your hours, your meetings, your extracurriculars, your self-care time, all your buckets. By a show of hands, how many of you was the 168-hour revealing that you tried to do more than 168 hours in 168 hours? Show of hands, anyone bold enough to say it? try to jam 200 hours of things into 168. You do the math and you go, no wonder I'm always sleeping less. No wonder the gym disappears. No wonder, meal prepping on a Sunday always seems to go away. That is one of the most common things is in our society, we have a tendency to want to do too many things. And so unfortunately, when we do the simple budget analysis, we realize, oh man, we're overspending our time. And as a result, we end up seeming inconsistent in certain areas. Did anybody notice anything interesting that surprised them about the 168 hours? Again, don't need absolute feedback, but in terms of like where your time was spent, did any of you find like, oh man, I'm doing a lot more of this than I realized, or this takes up a lot more time than I realized? I'm seeing some nodding heads. One of the things that happens there is there's sort of these like, we'll call them intangibles, right? Like things like being a parent, right? Like that's obviously a very important bucket in life if that's something that's a part of your life. And most people don't really ever put a number to how much time that takes. It just takes the time it takes. But then it's one of those things when you actually add up all the things you're doing, driving from here, driving to there. I had a client one time, I had her add up all the time she was the Uber for her kids' soccer practice and karate class and theater class, right? You have 3 kids doing 3 different things at 3 different schools. And she added it up and she's like, I'm in the car 36 hours a week. It's like, yeah, that's a thing, right? And that's one of those that if we don't put a number to it, you can just kind of let it be this weird, vague number. And then you just wonder why you never have the time and why the day disappears. And so that was one of the other things that this 168 is meant to show is a lot of times we spend more time doing things than we realize. And the good news is once we get clear on where we're spending our time, we can then really take the time to try and adjust some things. And that's what I want to kind of offer you some thoughts on today. So today is the how. And like I said in the beginning, how the hell am I going to reconcile this time budget so that I can get back into a situation that makes me feel better, that protects the things that need protected, and doesn't cause me to develop a gym obsession that makes me abandon my family and ruins my marriage? Because obviously we got to walk the tightrope, right? So this is what I like to call the time budget clash. And so it's a paradox I have listed in front of you and up on the screen. What's interesting is once you determine when you're going to eat, right? So the when, once you block when you're going to eat, you will immediately be able to project what you're eating based on the time block. That's why when is so important. So a way to think about it, if you know you're eating at 9 a.m., well, where are you at 9 a.m.? So like, what do you have access to? And so where people sit down with a dietitian and say, will you tell me what to eat? Well, my first question is like, where are you and what do you have access to? When, how, right? And so that's where this how is that bridge, that gap where once we know the when, it already kind of gives us our options. The same is true for exercise, right? Once you know when you're planning to exercise, you immediately know what your exercise options are, how you can exercise, right? And so instead of the, well, like, is resistance training better than cardio and trying to like focus on the minute details, most people don't need to be neurotic about like specific movements. Most people just need to move more. And so the question to what is the best exercise, which this is a little projection to our what talk next time, right? The what is, what do you have access to? Because you moving is what's most important. We can get neurotic and play devil in the details down the road, but first let's just get the habit going, right? And so when you know when you're going to exercise, if you decide your exercise time is at 12 o'clock in the middle of your workday because you like to have a 4 to 6 hour jam session in the morning and then you like to regroup middle of the day, refresh, and then hit it hard until 6, well, like, what do you have access to at noon? You've got a walking path around here. You've got a couple other options. If you've got an office with a door, or you're somebody that just has absolutely no shame, there's workout videos on demand everywhere, and your phone is a great resource. And so it's just another example of the limitations of how you're going to exercise are likely rooted in when you're going to exercise. Your gym routine versus your at-home routine, right? The when is going to tell you, well, do I need to be home with the kids? If so, I should probably be exercising at home and doing a type of exercise that's compatible with whatever level of childcare I have. They're doing homework upstairs. They're a bit more self-sufficient. I just need to be in the house versus I've got them on the freaking baby Bjorn and I'm doing squats with a toddler. Like whatever it is, right? We can hear, if we know when it's happening, the context starts to fill in the blank. And so This is the how. And it's kind of neat when you start to realize this is so obvious, but we don't take the time to slow down to think about it. So I'm not wowing you with anything that's genius. It's actually right in front of us, but we all just live such fast lives, we typically don't see it until we actually slow down to see it. So the big problem that I'm hoping I can give you some tips on today is reconciling that not everything fits, right? So the error in that handout that I gave you last time, which was the visual, for you visual learners, it was the blank schedule, and it was, okay, let's color in all of our 7 blocks. What % of days do we really think that life is going to live to the 15 minutes the way we blocked it out? The answer is 0 days, maybe 1. You know what? We'll say just because, probability ensues. 1 day, right? But the other 99%, we're not getting that to happen. And so part of the problem with templated diet and lifestyle issues is, as we've talked about, the incompatibility, but it's also the rigidity, the inability to sway. And that's one of the things that when we talk about how habits happen, one of those things is embracing the fact that you need to, what I like to say, sway like a skyscraper. For all of you engineers in the room, the Sears Tower was engineered to sway 40 feet in any direction given the winds. And the reason that that was structurally reasonable is because if it didn't, the winds were so high at that level, it would have actually compromised the structure itself. And so what we just said is that its ability to be less rigid made it stronger. So I want you to be the Sears Tower. I want you to recognize that having an absolute gym routine, having a to-the-minute measured eating routine is too rigid. It will set you up to fail. And so to some extent, how we navigate this is rooted in our ability to sway. It's like a skyscraper, to find some wiggle room and navigate the day-to-day chaoses that you ensue. And so all the tips that we have after this are hopefully to help you sway a little bit more effectively. One of my favorite ones is creative constraints. And so for those of you that are not familiar with the concept of creative constraints, it is the idea of giving enough context to hone an idea without reducing the autonomy of the idea. I'll give you an easy example of it first because this helps visualize. I could ask all of you in this room to draw me a picture. Super vague. All of you would draw pictures and we would get everything from squiggles and stars to maybe the next Mona Lisa. I don't know, but it'd be everything, right? There's no constraints. So where do you begin? Many of you are going to stare like a deer in headlights because there's frankly just too many options to start. I could then boil it down and give you too much constraint, right? I could be super rigid and say, I want you to draw me a picture of me. Well, we'd get a lot of the same thing and there'd be really no creative flares because I am dressed very predictably and I'm a brown-haired, brown-eyed, 6-foot-tall dude. I'm about as average as it comes, right? And so at the end of the day, those are 2 constraints that are not useful. We want to find the middle. We want to find a creative constraint. Draw me a picture of a safari scene. Some of you would draw giraffes, some would draw hippos, some might draw that tree from The Lion King. And if you do, I think you're cool because that's what I would do. Most of you would probably have a sun involved if I had to imagine. There might be a little other animals, little mammals running around. All to say, creative constraints matter. How does this apply to physical health and wellness? Well, the creative constraint, and I actually alluded to this last time for you guys with a great memory, that is the difference between a gym routine and an exercise routine. If you have a gym routine, what happens when you miss the gym? You didn't go to the gym today. If you have an exercise routine, where the gym may be the place that exercise happens most often, but you can't make it that day, you are exponentially more likely to find an alternative exercise. Go take a jog in the neighborhood, put a weighted vest on and walk the dog, do some push-ups in the living room. Whatever it is, we can hear where when you go from constraining yourself to gym routine to having exercise routine, you will improve the consistency of exercise, which is actually the point. The gym is the place, not the action. Right? And so I wouldn't discourage you from utilizing the gym as a place, but recognize that in busy lives, if we're going to sway like a skyscraper, skipping the extra 20 minutes to go to the gym to get to pick someone up for X, Y, and Z to then get home, that may be a time savings that you having an exercise routine that allows you to go run a mile in the neighborhood and do 50 push-ups, it might be the game changer. And so that is an example of how a creative constraint, just going like one level up, not gym routine, exercise routine, enhances your ability to consistently exercise monumentally. And we can hear where that also empowers the when. So we start to go, the when of a gym routine, well, that's pretty finite. When can you make it to the gym? Most of you would be able to tell me immediately. I can either go at 5 a.m. or 6 p.m. or something like that, right? When can you exercise? Well, there's a whole lot more slots available if we're going to talk about different types of activity. And so that's an example of sometimes dietary guidance is too rigid and it forces or encourages you to develop a routine that is not in itself sustainable. And then we have the audacity to blame our willpower, as opposed to recognizing that we'd be stronger if we had some degree of flexibility. So that's the gym version. The food version, this is one of my favorite ones because so many people, and Jesse, who is our lead RD at our Robinson location, he's back here if everyone wants to wave and say hi, Jesse. Jesse is our lead RD at Robinson. He can vouch for me at this. The amount of times that we get clients that sit down and they go, I'm here for a meal plan, tell me what to eat. It's like, that's the, and I beat this to death somewhat in this talk already, but the thought behind that is it's a rigid and inflexible plan. How many days are you actually going to be able to eat that exact thing? If you have a family at home and you want to eat chicken and rice and broccoli for dinner every night, how long does that last before you're cooking for one? You start to realize like the rigidity of the plan is incompatible with the life that is. What if instead of a set meal plan, you had a protein and produce at every meal plan? So every time I eat, every time I choose to chew on food, there must be a protein present and produce present, a fruit or a vegetable or both. How much more successful do you think you'd be at eating fruits and vegetables in that instance? Exponentially is the answer. I don't even need to make you wait for it. You would be so much more successful because you would walk into every circumstance not trying to find the chicken and broccoli, but trying to find the protein and produce. Go to a wedding, protein and produce. All of a sudden, when you're standing in the buffet line and there's that stupid dinner roll that you're going to regret putting on your plate once you start to fill your plate, you pass that. Ooh, salad. Let's put it on the main plate instead of the bowl because now we have double salad. What's the protein? Do we have chicken and beef probably? Can you tell I've been to a couple weddings? Let's put the chicken and the beef on top. Hey, let's put some carb on there. It's probably, I don't know, potatoes and pasta because we're in Pittsburgh. Which one do you want? How much potato do you think you're going to serve yourself on top of a bed of greens instead of if it was a blank plate? So the salad portion controlled the carb, you doubled up on the protein, and we just walked through a wedding meal and we got room for some cookies at the cookie table now. Holy crap. Our flexibility enhanced our ability to navigate even really, really like annoying circumstances, if we're being honest. One of my favorite ones I give is the example of Chipotle in Market Square. Show of hands, who's been in Market Square during lunch hour? It's hell on earth, right? Yeah. Specifically the Chipotle, right? From like 11 to 1, that Chipotle has a line that goes out the door and down the block. Like it is gross how busy it is. So let's just say for fun, you were working in Market Square and you were doing a good job. You were being a good student and saying, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to project my meals for tomorrow. I'm going to be in Market Square. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to go to Chipotle for lunch. Boom, I did it. I succeeded. I projected my day. I'm not going to pack my food because I have my option. 11:30 rolls around, you sneak out with your 30-minute lunch hour, line down the block. I can't go to Chipotle. What do you grab? Probably whatever has the shortest line. Slice of pizza, pop into the 7-Eleven, grab a sandwich and an apple. Nothing great is the answer, right? Like, I mean, you're probably not picking something you're proud of is reality. What if instead of a Chipotle projection, you had said, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to go to Chipotle and I'm going to get we'll call it, I'm going to get the chicken and I'm going to do the salad and I'm going to add some rice to it. So now all of a sudden you're thinking, hey, I'm going to get the protein and the produce. I'm going to get the salad. Now you walk in, same circumstance, and your brain goes, crap, where else can I get a salad? That creative constraint, that one step of specificity completely changed your subconscious response. And so these creative constraints can be super valuable. And the tip I'd give you is when we're projecting, which is something we're going to talk about here in a bit, Paying attention to the level of constraint will show you in time what's the appropriate degree of constraint. Most adults would benefit from a protein and produce-based food constraint, which is whatever meal you're at, where's the protein, where's the produce? You can do that everywhere, all the time. I don't even care if you're at a barbecue in the summer, right? Like every circumstance, protein and produce is present and can be prioritized and will naturally portion all your favorite things the way it's supposed to, right? It's the idea that pizza, chips, pasta, I'll even just pause with those three. Those foods, if I asked everybody to write down 10 unhealthy foods, those three would probably be on most people's lists. And what's hilarious is none of those foods are unhealthy. The problem is we eat them like entrees and they're side dishes. Pizza is just a carb and a fat. It's the same calorically as a slice of pizza, half a cup of rice, half a tablespoon of olive oil. Would you eat olive oil and rice and call it lunch? No, you'd be like, what else is for lunch? But we eat pizza and we call it lunch all the time. Pasta and rice, cup for cup, same calories, same macro split. Who here eats a cup of rice about the size of my fist? Pretty much everybody. Who here eats a cup of pasta? It's laughable. No one does. You eat 4 cups of pasta, right? Well, the reason is because pasta's the dinner. It has a sauce on it and it's done. It's quick, it's easy. Where's the protein and where's the produce? Oh my gosh, if we had a protein and produce rule, all of a sudden your pasta would have zucchini added to it, maybe a chunky sauce. Maybe you take half the pasta and also add some zucchini noodles to it to just bulk it up a little bit. And then we either make some meatballs or put some chicken breast sliced up inside it, or you get real crazy and do some shrimp and some lump crab. I'd be a fan of that one. Either way, we'd probably be eating less pasta in that equation. The plate size is probably the same, but the percentage of it that's pasta is now smaller. I always enjoyed it. My first office was in East Liberty, which is right by Bloomfield, Pittsburgh's Little Italy. A lot of my clients, Italian-American descent, especially early in my career, and the amount of people that would go, I want to lose some weight, but you can't take my pasta from me. I'm Italian. I'd say, I'm not going to take your pasta from you. I'm going to ask you to eat pasta like an Italian. So pasta only is an Italian-American thing. And it's because Italians immigrated here during the Civil War and the Great Depression. So they were once our poorest immigrants taking the jobs that they needed to take to feed their family a loaf of bread once a week. So pasta dinner was rooted in immigration and poverty. It is not an Italian tradition. If you go to Italy, by show of hands, anyone go to Italy? Yeah, got some hands, good. They don't serve just pasta, ever. Like pasta is a side dish. It's usually in a little teeny dish on the side of some sort of meat and protein. Or they give you a nice twirl of pasta with a really chunky sauce that has a ton of vegetables and a protein sitting on top. They make it the side dish, which is what it's supposed to be. So these are just some examples of how we can use these constraints like a protein and produce to take some of our favorite foods that we typically tell ourselves we can't eat. No, it's not that you can't eat it. It's that you need to level up how you eat it. Notice that word how keeps coming up, right? The last one I'll give you is chips, just because why not? I said it, I might as well think through it. Chips was one for me personally, deep share that, I don't need the therapy for anymore. I've been there, done that, wore that t-shirt. But chips were dinner for me a lot when I was a kid. And so as a result, I personally had a habit of if a bag of chips was in front of me, that bag was gone. And so I did what any good, healthy high schooler and college kid would do. I just stopped eating chips. No chips, right? Well, fast forward a couple years later, get engaged, move in with the wife, who's one of those people that at the time could just like eat a handful of chips. What a psychopath, right? How do you do that? How is that even possible? But all of a sudden, there's a pantry in the house that has 7 types of chips, and I'm working 12-hour days. So man, family-sized bag of chips for dinner, that's 6-year-old time, right? You're just inner child, happy as can be. The problem wasn't the chips. The problem was my relationship with how I ate the chips, right? So I could have had some options. I could have done what every 25-year-old husband would probably do. I could have said, you're not allowed to keep these in the house. They're making me fat. Yeah, nice victim lens, right? We love that one. That one's fun. Or I could do what every good, friendly neighborhood dietitian does. And I could say, wait a second, I need to change my relationship with this food. Ooh, that seems pretty insightful. I like that one. That makes me sound smart for a second. What I did is I bought little sandwich baggies and I packed a serving of chips in my lunchbox every day for a month. And I paired it with big turkey sandwich with extra turkey, an apple, a Greek yogurt, and typically a protein bar. And all of a sudden the chips went from being their own entree slash a snack to being a side dish. And all of a sudden the chips were this like salty, crunchy accessory to a really balanced meal. They weren't this lonely food that by itself just invited its friends and just kept eating and eating and eating. And so yet another example of how if we prioritize protein and produce and we allow snacks to become side dishes, we allow side dishes to become side dishes, all of a sudden everything that most of our country spends its time like guilting and shaming and avoiding, you can all of a sudden moderate. And it's not through willpower you're moderating it, it's through strategy. It's through how you're eating it. So this is the power of the how, and this is the power of creative constraints, is getting clear on what you're trying to prioritize when you go into a meal. And so I would challenge each of you to the protein and produce concept for the month ahead, just as a note for you to take for yourself. Walk into every reality of your life this next month, whatever meal it is, where's my protein, where's my produce? And watch how quickly you catch the exceptions to that norm. Watch how quickly you find the random handfuls of stuff that you're not even conscious you're eating. Watch how many times you catch yourself settling for a dinner that's a bowl of cereal because you just can't even, right? Watch how often you make the bowl of pasta and the kids will eat it and they don't want anything else and you just skip the vegetable because it doesn't even taste that good anyway. And then you overeat the pasta and you feel bloated and then the next morning you're not very hungry. So then you skip breakfast. We can hear the snowball, right? I've done it 1,000 times and I'll probably do it 10,000 more in my career if I'm lucky. But I will challenge you to the protein and produce view. That is one of the more potent creative constraints if I'm going to tell you how to draw in the world of nutrition. And from an exercise perspective, just inspect your current exercise constraint. Typically, if you're trying to exercise and you're not doing it as well as you'd like, you either have unrealistic expectations or your constraint is too narrow, which is like you have a gym routine or you have a video routine or that girl on TikTok made you feel like walking wasn't enough. It's typically some sort of issue in that department where we start to go, wait a second, am I neglecting movement because of random stories that are telling me any movement is, not enough, that it has to be specific things? Because the way to think about it, I'll give you a fun example to think through. I had a client, this actually happened last week, walks into my office and was like, how'd the month go? Catch me up. What was going on in your world? Talk to me about fitness. Well, I've been going to the gym, but I'm not as consistent as I should be. Like we talked about going 5 days a week and I'm only going 3 and it's really starting to piss me off. It's like, you were going 0 a month ago. What's your reference comparison? If you're comparing 3 to 5, you feel awful. But if you compare 3 to 0, you're an absolute champion. The comment being the 0 was reality and the 5 doesn't exist. Like you're comparing yourself to a hypothetical you that's never been proven. Why are we setting ourselves up to fail? So instead, let's do the thing that we all learned in 3rd grade. Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you land amongst the stars. Everyone else have that banner in their 3rd grade classroom? Yeah, show of hands. I can tell everyone's my age. This is really fun. But anywho, so it's to say that's an example of where we can sometimes have references that are unrealistic for us. If you find yourself starting an exercise routine and you overestimated your ability to move and then you're like falling a little short, but you've gotten better, which side are we comparing to, right? So these are just little mindset tweaks that can help keep you motivated, help you navigate, and also get you moving more consistently. Okay, exception mindset. This is one of my favorite things. I will preface it by saying I cannot take credit for the brilliance that is this concept. This is owned by Gretchen Rubin. Gretchen Rubin is a psychologist turned author. She has written quite a few books. Her 2 dominant books that put her on the map were what's called Better Than Before, and then a book called 4 Core Tendencies. I won't waste a ton of time digging into the nuances of the concept, but I will give an elevator pitch that the 4 core tendencies are basically how we as individuals respond to expectations. So internal expectations, a goal for self; external expectations, a goal set for you by other. How do you respond to that? Reading that book, you will understand how you respond to expectations, which allows you to better understand the way you need to set yourself up to succeed. So for example, I'm a questioner in the 4 core tendencies, which means I reject external expectations and I only respond to internal expectations. That is Sometimes a good thing, but it also means I can be super stubborn. Probably why I'm a CEO of my own company and never worked for anybody else and started a business at 22, and tend to be fairly contrarian if I'm going to psychoanalyze myself. I question the crap out of everything. It can kind of make you a dick if you're not willing to internalize other people's things. So what I have to do, just as a share, is my life hack is if I have an external expectation, I have to intentionally try and internalize it. And so where that can be useful is like an external expectation from a partner. Well, I care about that person, so their needs are my needs. Now all of a sudden that's internalized. Now all of a sudden it doesn't feel like this external thing that makes me want to rebel like crazy. So that's a short example of I'm a questioner. There are also rebels who just tend to reject all expectations. There are obligers who tend to respond really well to external but struggle with internal. If you're somebody that likes and benefits from a coach for everything, you like having a trainer, you like having a dietitian, you like having a mentor, you're typically obligating yourself to others to get it done. Maybe you did study groups when you were in school. That's an obliger personality. So we have the questioner, the obliger, the rebel, and then the last one's the rarest of the rare. It's called the upholder. They respond to all expectations. They're the military style. Tell me what to do, I do it. They're the people that in the nutrition world, you give them a meal plan and they just do it. They don't ever question it. They don't ever analyze it. They don't ever let anyone else interrupt it. They just steamroll their way through. They tend to have really, really, really poor boundaries in a lot of ways. So they have their own struggles. All to say, Four Core Tendencies, really cool book for self-understanding. Her book next to it is called Better Than Before. That is where once you understand your tendency, she teaches you how to hack your tendency. And that is what I shared. Me as a questioner, I have a tendency towards analysis paralysis, so I need to be more decisive. I also have a tendency to put my own internal drive first, which means if I care about somebody, I need to work on internalizing their needs so that I can do a better job of that. Just a good example of where it creates self-awareness. Better Than Before is pretty awesome though, because you don't even need to know your tendency. It enhances the book immensely. But it really just focuses on how do you improve self. And so a lot of different sort of life hacking, habit hacking that we're talking about, that book is awesome for. My favorite thing in this book is called The Exception Mindset. And so the exception mindset is a really interesting observation that should resonate very well after this combo, but also it's actually most relevant. It was studied the most in smoking cessation. And so the long story made short is that they interviewed smokers 6 months in. So they had been not smoking for 6 months. And they were able to very accurately predict whether a smoker was going to continue not smoking or whether they were going to resume smoking based on a couple core fundamental psychologies. And one of them was called the exception mindset. And the exception mindset basically is an opponent to what we'd call that like perfectionist tendency, right? Where when that moment happened where that person smoked one cigarette, what did it mean? Was it an exception to the current trend of not smoking? In which case they had internalized that they were a non-smoker and they would continue not smoking? Or was it the end of a fake trend of not smoking? They are a smoker, and it is the start of their cruel reality that they are a smoker. And so they asked a couple questions that helped them basically better understand, do you identify as a non-smoker and this is just an exception to your norm? Or do you identify as a smoker and the non-smoking period was an exception to your norm? It also goes completely against like basically what we call like abstinence behavior, which is why smoking is such an interesting thing, right? Smoking, how do you quit smoking? You abstain from it. The reason this all becomes so relevant is because we can't necessarily abstain from food. I mean, we can't abstain from food, but also abstaining from certain foods becomes extremely tricky, especially when our tendency to abstain from foods is a lot of times our favorite foods that we just don't know how to eat yet. And so we end up in this reality where every Lent you give up your favorite chocolate only to sweat the 40 days, cross the finish line, and eat more of it in the following week than you had in the prior year combined, right? That is an example of abstinence creating relapse. The exception mindset boils down to this idea of what meaning are you giving exceptions? One of my favorites is Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a holiday where the average person in the United States eats over 6,000 calories in a day. So it's a surplus for everybody but Michael Phelps, right? Like it's just, pretty pervasive surplus. What's hilarious is in the short term, when you have a day like that, your metabolism goes up, you burn a bunch of it. And if you go back to eating the next day, nothing happens. Your body just kind of keeps churning on. But what a lot of people do is they feel guilty or shameful about the gluttony. And then they say, well, while I'm failing, and they decide to keep eating that way for the rest of the year through Christmas. And so all of a sudden, one day, which was an exception, became 6 weeks of exceptions. Well, that's no longer an exception. And so holiday weight gain is an example of people that do not have the exception mindset. What's hilarious is if you treated the holiday season like an exception, you would, and I'll even do me because my birthday is between Christmas and Thanksgiving. So I have an extra exception to deal with. But it's to say, if you dealt with Thanksgiving and then all the core holidays, let's toss in the holiday Christmas party, let's toss in the Friendsgiving, let's give you the benefit of the doubt and say you're the most social person ever. Between Christmas and New Year's is on average 40 days, and at most you're gonna have 10 events. If you enjoyed those 10 events and then had 30 normal days, you wouldn't have a holiday setback that everyone talks about. The problem is that because we have 10 events and they feel so close together, we just blur the lines and say, screw it. I call it slashing the tires. It's the idea of you get a flat tire, pull off on the side of the road, and you slash the other 3. Because like you already had a flat tire, you might as well make it horrifically inconvenient for yourself, right? That is that mindset. That is the relapse mindset. That is what makes alcoholism alcoholism. If an alcoholic could have a shot of whiskey and say, well, that was a fun exception, there wouldn't be alcoholism. But they finish the bottle and then clear the liquor cabinet and then disappear for a month. So is it the exception that's the issue, or is it the behavior that follows? So one of the things we want to be thinking about is what meaning are we giving exceptions? Are we treating them like gross failures, or are we treating them like exceptions? And if we treat them like exceptions and we bounce back and press play, holy crap, now all of a sudden you're resilient. And chances are, in a normal year, I like to call it the 300, because there's probably 300 days that could be normal and probably 65 days that are going to have some form of chaos. Vacations, anniversaries, that week you get sick, the week the kids get sick and then get you sick, whatever it is. It typically adds up to about 65 days of chaos. Well, the comment is if you had a good eating plan where you prioritized protein and produce and you had a good exercise routine where you tried to stay active and you were able to hit it 300 out of 365 days, do we think at the end of the year we'd be healthier? Probably. That's 80% of the time. That's actually pretty damn impressive. But our exception, or the abstinence mindset, our absence of the exception mindset, tends to cause those 65 to become 365. Why bother if I can't do it perfectly? And unfortunately, actually, or I should say fortunately, health and wellness is a spectrum. It's a gray area. It's not absolutes. It's not this or that. It's habits to collect. Every good meal you collect for yourself, every good movement you collect for yourself, every self-care intervention you collect for yourself is accumulating and contributing to an overall greater good. And so collecting as much as possible is the game, and then troubleshooting the how lets you get better and better and better at collecting it. So, couple things I'll note with the exception mindset, bringing us back to our slides for a sec. Weekly plans versus daily plans, right? And so this is something that I think can be really valuable when we think about eating and moving. When you have a daily plan, sometimes that creates feelings of failure. So I'm gonna exercise every day. Chances are you're not. Let's be real for a second, right? So instead of having a daily exercise routine, what if we had a weekly exercise routine of I'm going to train 3 days a week or 4 days a week? That weekly plan instead of that daily plan, if we're going to boil it down, the difference is it accounts for exceptions. If you've got a busy life, you could even start your week and say, I'm going to work out 4 days this week. And then the 3 that you don't could always move, right? We could always flip-flop things around. One of the things that this can bring up is the idea of what happens when I've scheduled my exercise and then something comes up that's really urgent or important. What most people do is they cross out the exercise, they cancel the appointment. That's the error. You don't cancel it, you reschedule it. And that's the benefit of having like a 4-day exercise routine. If you have the ability to reschedule it to one of the other days, oh, you know what? Yeah, you know what? Tomorrow I've got time between here and here. I'll exercise tomorrow. You just reschedule the meeting. Guess who just swayed like a skyscraper, right? That's the cool concept. So sometimes a weekly routine can really help over a daily routine. It's no different than looking at your food for the week from a weekly lens. Sometimes on a Sunday, looking at the week ahead and saying, like, what do I got going on, can be a very, very valuable view, because it's going to show you the chaos, it's going to show you the variance, and it's also going to help you with the desire for variety that happens. It's like, oh, you know what, I'm going to be over on this side of town that day for this. That'd be a really good day to go to lunch. And where this can become really interesting, so I'll even share the weekly versus the daily. This actually hit me personally like a ton of bricks a couple years back, because I, for a long time, had a very daily routine. I was at one office every day, long hours, and then I started to go to different locations, and I started to do contracts and wellness talks and all these kind of things. And all of a sudden, my Tuesdays were the same. Like I was at, for example, I had a city contract. So I was at Police Academy working with police officers on Tuesdays. But Monday I was at my East Liberty office, and Wednesday I was at my Plum office, and then Thursday I was at the City County building, as an example. And so I didn't have a daily routine. I actually had a weekly routine. My Tuesdays matched and my Thursdays matched. And so I could all of a sudden step back and go, okay, given that my work days at my offices, I can't leave very easily, and it's in East Liberty and it's in Plum, so it's kind of a food desert area. If I don't pack my food, I'm SOL. So those days I'm going to pack my food. I need to grocery shop on the weekend, given that reality. Hey, when I'm at Police Academy, there's that HelloFresh thing right down the street that I really like. I'm going to get a salad there on those days, right? And so it allows you, when you zoom out, you can see the variety in your week, and sometimes that allows you to infuse variety in your week. You may also reveal better days to go to the gym versus at-home workouts. And so that weekly versus daily allows you to kind of see a couple things, which is one, it allows you the grace of exceptions, which is recognizing that instead of thinking that exceptions are a deviation, they're actually a part of it. Right? Notice that difference there is when I talked about grabbing the salad, or even earlier when I talked about grabbing the Chipotle. Those are examples where that wasn't me, quote unquote, cheating on my diet. It was me integrating variety into my diet intentionally. And all of a sudden, it doesn't feel like I'm failing. It doesn't feel like I deviated from the meal plan and now I need to text my dietitian and say, hey, I need a couple more weeks. I haven't been hitting it as hard as I'd like. It's like, no, I've been doing my best to navigate. I've been prioritizing the right creative constraints. I've been making sure there's protein and produce present. I'm consistent amongst chaos. Okay, here's a fun one. Budget cuts versus budget efficiencies. So going back to your 168 hours, for those of you that have more than 168 hours planned, there's that, oh my gosh, how the hell do I do this? Like, I can't just donate a kid. I've got to make this work. Like, what's going to give here? So one of the things I'll note is the weekly versus daily. That is one of the hacks. But the comment on this slide is we're really trying to prioritize budget cuts are when you realize that certain things can actually just be cut. Like when you did your budget, you might have noticed that you spent way too much time doing something that you just don't actually want to be doing, like spending that time doing. Amount of time in a car can be a good example of something like that, where we might be able to actually cut something. And I'll give some examples here shortly. Budget efficiencies are when we can actually maybe combine some things to kill two birds with one stone. And so sometimes some of these things have hours overlap. So let's dig into some examples of this. Meal prep is one of my favorite ones. So there is the I'm going to make dinner every day, which is a time suck, right? That's at least an hour every day, because meat takes on approximately 45 minutes unless you got an air fryer. Ooh, time cut. But it's to note that daily prepping, sometimes a bit overburdening. Weekly prepping, if you want to be a bodybuilder that eats the same thing on Sunday that he does on Thursday, or she, or you have that desire to pop open a Thursday meal prep container that's 5 days old. I don't want to do those things. And so for me, weekly meal prep, gross. I don't enjoy it. But that's the spectrum. You could do it daily. You could do it weekly, probably not more, less often than that. But what if you did it twice a week? What if Sundays and Wednesdays was meal prep days? All of a sudden, Sunday night, you cook something and you have that for Monday, Tuesday. And then Wednesday night, you cook something fresh and you have it for Thursday. And then Friday, you guys order takeout or you have a date night. That's an example of where we can shift something that might have a daily time constraint if you're doing the daily cooking to something that might fit into your budget a little bit better. And I give you the spectrum to note that like a lot of people have this assumption of like, well, I guess I just have to start meal prepping on Sundays, and then you don't do it because it sucks. And the point of a healthy lifestyle is not for it to suck, it's to support you. And so having good access to food is awesome because it's one less decision to try to have to make in the middle of the day. And so trying to find that sweet spot of given who I'm cooking for and prepping for, family dynamics, food preferences, food allergies, right? Let's think about how can we find the sweet spot of how many days does it make sense to cook. That's an example of how you can actually condense the time and actually cut some hours out of the budget, but you're also doing it in a way that's going to give you some variety. You can take it a step further. I'm a big fan of when I cook 2 meals, like 2 different meals, right? And so if I cook on Sunday, I cook 2 things. If I cook on Wednesday, I cook 2 things. Now I have variety. And so now all of a sudden I'm eating something slightly different every day. The only downside is I'm reheating in this conversation, but I'm getting the variety I want with only 2 cook times. And cooking 2 things at once doesn't take that much more time, which is kind of cool. So there's even some opportunities like that. I'm a big fan of also thinking about the tiers of prep. So everyone knows about meal prep, but have you guys heard about meat prep? Right? Meat prep is one of my favorite things because realistically, the most time-consuming part of a meal is the protein being cooked. And so what happens if you've prepped the protein over the weekend and now all of a sudden it's Tuesday and the meat is cooked and just needs heated and you just have to give it some friends? Well, that hour-long cook session just became 15 minutes. I can reheat some chicken or whatever it is in the air fryer with some frozen red potatoes and some green beans with sea salt, and in 12 minutes I have dinner. And it tastes delicious. And then the next day I could take that chicken and I could bake a sweet potato and drizzle hot sauce on top and have a buffalo chicken stuffed sweet potato. And then the next day I could pop it in some chicken broth, add some minute rice to it and make a chicken and rice soup. And then the next day I could top it on a salad and put some croutons and some cheese and some tomatoes, and now I have a grilled chicken salad. All of those are 10 minutes away when the meat's ready. And so you don't even have to meal prep. You can just meat prep. And what's cool is all meats cook at 350. Slight time differences, like 25 versus 30 versus 35 versus 40 when you go from fish down to chicken. But you can literally put 2 different meats on 2 different pans in the same oven and in less than an hour have 2 meats cooked for the week, ready to go, and then use them differently as the week goes on. And now all of a sudden you just have to have the friends ready. Buy a couple sweet potatoes, have some salad stuff, maybe have some wraps in case you need a quick one, grab a minute rice if you don't have time to boil it from scratch. We can really give it friends much more easily when the protein's present. And the comment is also, if you know you have some delicious tasting protein at home, you're less likely to pull the trigger on that DoorDash or pull the trigger on that drive-through because you know you got something at home that's not 45 minutes away, right? So meat prep is an example of yet another way that we can create some efficiency where you're not spending an hour a day, you're spending 15 minutes a day, but you're getting variety. You're not opening up that chicken, rice, and broccoli on Thursday to the smell of 5-day-old broccoli that makes you want to pass out and makes you rather not eat anyway, especially if you're tired and stressed on a Thursday night and you're like, man, I could really use something tasty. Pop. Nah, let's not do that to ourselves. Food is supposed to be delicious and nutritious. If you're missing one, you need to see a dietitian. Delicious, it should taste good. If it doesn't, come talk to us, right? Nutritious, if you're eating trash, also come talk to us. We'll help you find the sweet spot. But so last piece I'll mention, outsourcing the tiers. Shameless plug for case-specific meal prep, who you guys know because they're in the front lobby in the refrigerator. If you haven't put 2 and 2 together, case-specific is my super creative name I came up with, and so I may or may not be an owner of that company. One of the things I'll note is meal prep is an example of something that, once again, doesn't have to have an absolutist thought. I personally work late Wednesdays and Thursdays. So I order CSMP meals for myself for Wednesdays and Thursdays, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And I pop it in my Yeti lunchbox, and I don't have to think about food for either of those days when I am counseling like a psychopath. That's an example of, I have those 2 days taken off the grid. They're my most stressful, longest days. So now all of a sudden, I just got to figure out food for Monday, Tuesday, Friday. Well, that's pretty cool because Sunday I can make stuff for Monday, Tuesday. and then I can have CSMP take care of me, and then all I have to do is figure out something fun on Friday, which that tends to be a good situation. So that's an example of you don't even have to do like a Factor or a, one of those meal preps, or even ours where you're ordering all your meals for the whole week in advance. You can always supplement it. Pick your most stressful nights. If you've got kids and you've got extracurricular nights, maybe you order a meal prep type service for those nights specifically. Delegate and take things off your plate. That is a time savings, right? So that's just an example of you can outsource in varying tiers. Find some stresses, and sometimes, not every day, but certain days it might be worth paying for. So other thoughts with budget cuts and budget efficiencies. From an exercise perspective, I always like to note the intensity of the workout can be really helpful. For those of you that want to go down a fun rabbit hole, look up Tabata workouts, T-A-B-A-T-A, Tabata. Tabata workouts are little circuit trainings that you basically do like this exercise for 10 seconds, then take a break for 10 seconds, then next exercise 10 seconds. And they actually have Tabata timers you can download on your phone. And they even have Tabata apps where you pick 6 exercises, push-ups, sit-ups, jumping jacks, step lunges, and squats. And it'll literally beep, and you'll do one for 10 seconds, and then it'll beep, you pause 10, and then it beeps, and then you do the next one. And you do 6 exercises for 6 rounds, 10 seconds each, and it adds up to like 15 minutes. And it will beat the crap out of you. So do more with less, right? We can find ways to find good intensity of workouts. I'm a huge fan of like the spontaneous 1 mile run. I know I sound like a psycho when I say that. I used to be a runner, so I love running, which is also why I probably sound crazy. But it is to note that a 1 mile run is 10 to 12 minutes if you're not a runner. If you're a walk jog person, it's max 20 minutes. So it's to say it's a max 20-minute thing that gives a great challenge to your heart and your lungs, boosts your mood, challenges your body, relaxes certain aspects of your body, obviously, intensifies certain aspects of your body too. But it is an example of something that is quick and compact and portable. And what's interesting is the person that ran the mile in 6 minutes and the person that walked the mile in 20 minutes, they burned the same amount of calories. Just the one person burned it in 6 minutes, the other burned it in 20. It's a time value. And so at the end of the day, like, you're going to get the value, you're going to get the benefit if we're exercising for calories' sake. I'm more of an exercise for sanity's sake, gets me out of my head and all that good stuff. But intensity of workouts, Tabata routines, circuit routines, HIIT routines, get on a bike and instead of pedaling for 30 minutes and falling asleep, 60 seconds push, 60 seconds active recovery. 5-minute warm up, 10 60-second pushes, 5-minute cool down, 30 minutes goes by way faster. I add to this bundling. So for those of you that aren't familiar, there's a concept in psychology called temptation bundling. Pair something you hate with something you love to make it suck less. That's the concept. That's why everyone listens to music when they run. Can you imagine like 50 years ago when you had to just like run? Like those crazy people, you know what I mean? Like what? Like just running with just your thoughts? Like, whoo, I don't know. But all to say, temptation bundling is a really, really cool thing to do. The HIIT workout is an example of a workout where because it keeps your attention, it helps things go faster. Well, there's other ways to do that. Some of the ones I noted, walking meetings. This is one of the best things, whether it's a walking pad, whether it's walking outside, or whether it's pacing in a fairly large office. I do a bunch of phone calls every day, and that is how I manage to get a ridiculous amount of steps, is I'll have my laptop on a standing desk and I'll be walking and talking like this, just kind of walking around, and then I got to take some notes. And I can add like literally 6,000 to 8,000 steps a day just walking during my meetings I'm talking with. Different jobs are obviously gonna have different variable amounts of that, but walking meetings become valuable. And it's also not just on the phone, but like if 2 of you need to chat through something, instead of sitting in a conference room, taking a lap, like that type of thing can be very powerful. Elliptical emails, which not a great temptation bundle because it's 2 things that suck, but sometimes things like emails suck more than the elliptical, which makes the elliptical seem like the fun part. At least that's what I tell myself when I'm in my basement doing my E&Es is what I call them, elliptical emails. It's a good way to warm up. It's a good way to wake up. It's a good way to get your mind going. If you're somebody that has a tendency to be wired a little hot, a little anxious, having a physical outlet as a baseline can actually help your focus in the cognitive task. And so a low thing like a walking or an elliptical can actually really kind of hone you in and engage you. So that can be a good example of something. So those are just examples of ways we can bundle where we might be able to increase our step count, increase overall activity, increase exercise at that point. By pairing it with something. And then there are the fun ones, which is like taking a walk with a friend or getting a lifting buddy if you're going to go to the gym or joining a workout class. Why do we think that there's been all these different workout classes where like every different thing is now exercise? It's an attempt to make exercise more fun, Zumba and all those kind of things. So thinking about that, how can I socialize and exercise? How can I be productive and exercise? How can I bundle two things? This is very different than multitasking. Multitasking is a delusion. You can't actually multitask. You just like split your time between two things. And by the time you like focus on this thing and then like wind down and then wind up on this thing, it is horrifically inefficient. But if you are doing two things that work with different parts of the brain, the conscious brain, the prefrontal cortex, and your limbic brain, like walking and talking, those two things absolutely can coexist. So just noting that this isn't necessarily multitasking, it is bundling. But it can be really valuable and it can be a nice time savings for you. So, secrets of success. This is kind of us wrapping up. I'm going to give you some homework and then we're going to get out of here. One of my favorite things, and it's something I would like to challenge you all to, in addition to the protein and produce monitor that I mentioned earlier, is nightly projections. Take 5 minutes before you go to bed every night this month. Look at tomorrow and just say, where am I going to be and when am I doing things? When am I eating breakfast? Okay, where am I going to be for that? As a result, guess what's going to happen? What's for breakfast? When am I having lunch? Where am I going to be? What's for lunch? When am I having dinner? Where am I going to be? What's for dinner? If you do nightly projections, and I would also add, when am I going to move tomorrow? Where am I going to be? How am I going to move, right? But if we can do nightly projections, write your day in pencil. That's all it is. You don't have to write it in pen. But if you go into your day with projections in mind, you will be exponentially more consistent in the next couple of weeks. You will watch breakfast, lunch, and dinner become more consistent. The choices, you'll find that they're delicious and nutritious more often. You'll find that movement happens more often. And the note is, if you end up having a day where one of those things gets sacrificed, we don't cancel those meetings, we reschedule them, right? You can move lunch an hour as long as you can move in an hour. So if I have a lunch at 12 and a meeting at 1 and they want to flip it to 12, I'm good with that. But if a meeting needs added at 12, I'm eating. So like you can either like deal with my chewing in that meeting or you can kindly find another time. And so finding those types of boundaries for self of like, I will reschedule a meeting or I will bundle a meeting. Meetings are more fun with lunch anyway, right? So these are some thoughts. Nightly projections. As I noted, do not write these in pen. We are swaying like a skyscraper. Pencil is meant to give us guidance and give us the ability to make adjustments that may make more sense in the moment. All this is meant to do is help you feel more proactive. A lot of times when people feel like they're failing in health and wellness, it's because they're shooting from the hip. It's oh crap, it's 2 o'clock, what can I grab for lunch? That is a reaction, and we don't do our best work from a reactive state. We all know that to be true. I don't think I need to convince you on that. Being proactive is going to help. If we have an idea that tomorrow we're going to lunch and we're going to be in Market Square and we're going to get a salad, we are going to be much better prepared to navigate the chaos that is Market Square in that metaphor or that analogy that I gave. So those are the pieces. Like I said, I challenge you to the nightly project on your phone before bed. I think it's a good way to decompress on the day you just had, and it's a great way to project the day that you're going to have. You may notice you actually sleep better too, because your day feels a little better spelled out. So now all of a sudden you know you're starting at 7 as an example. And then I would note it's sometimes fun to look at the expectation versus reality. So when you project, put an iNote on your phone. Tomorrow, breakfast 9 a.m. this, lunch 12 p.m. this, snack 3 p.m. this, dinner 6 p.m. this. That next night when you go to project again, reflect on your previous day. Did it actually happen? What were the alternatives? Did they go well? How was the proactive versus reactive? So you can start to do not just a project, but what we call a reflect and project. All that's going to do is help you live your life more intentionally during all the chaos that is your reality. And then, like I said, we're going to project everything in pencil, and I will, when I see you guys next time, we are going to make sure that we kind of talk through how did the projections feel? How did the creative constraints help you with your protein and produce, as an example? Where did consistency come from? Did navigating the how really create some beneficial things? So I will look forward to updates. We're going to be meeting in a month. And so I know it's the middle of the week. We're back to a Wednesday. Is it the 25th?
Wednesday, March 26th.
26th. March 26th. It's a Wednesday at noon. And so I will see all of you then, and my contact info is on the board if you need me in the meantime. Thanks for the attention.